Hey, good morning and welcome. How's everyone doing today? Hey, Nourhan. Hey, Anthony. How are you guys today?
Hey Sanjeev, hey everyone.
Hey, Sanjeev. Hey, Nourhan. Hi, everyone.
All right. So I figured, we'll give it a couple more minutes before we actually get started with the session, just to give everyone a chance to join the live stream. So we'll just hang out for the next couple of minutes until we're ready to start. And so for those of you that have joined the live stream, just just hang out for a bit. Let us know where you guys are from. And hopefully you guys are excited for the second session of this cohort. Hey, Jude, how's it going? Oh, looks like we lost Anthony.
Sorry about that.
Hey, Boswell. Hey, Ruslan. How's it going? Looks like we've got a good spread of people from all over the world today. We've got some from India, Amsterdam, Ukraine, Egypt, Brazil. Awesome. Okay, so I think we've got a good number of people on the stream. Let's go ahead and get started. So good morning, everyone. I just want to welcome you to the second Golden Kubestronaut cohort session. This is the second of 5 sessions that we have scheduled. So my name is Sanjeev Thiagarajan, and I'm joined by Anthony and Nourhan. Now, if you weren't able to join us on the first session a couple weeks ago, I just kind of want to highlight, what we're trying to accomplish with these sessions. So the main goal of these sessions is to offer guidance, tips and tricks, as well as answer any questions that you guys might have about the Golden Kubestronaut, as well as any of the certifications that are part of the track. And so for each one of these sessions, we'll obviously provide Q&A so you guys can ask all the questions that you want. But we like to make it so that each session focuses on either, one or a couple of the different certifications necessary to achieve the Golden Kubestronaut. So for this session, we're going to be focusing on the 2 topics of networking and service meshes. So we're mainly going to focus on the Cilium Certified Associate Exam and the Istio Certified Associate Exam. Now, you can obviously ask us any questions about any of the certifications, but we will put a little bit of an emphasis on those 2 certs. And on this call, I've brought in Anthony, who is actually the creator of the Istio course on the Code Cloud platform. So if you guys have any questions about Istio or the certification, this is the guy to ask. And we've also got Nourhan. So if you don't know, Nourhan has recently achieved her Golden Kubestronaut. So congratulations on that. I think did you do that just last week, or was that 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, last week. Thank you, Sanjeev.
But yeah, she is officially a Golden Kubestronaut. She went through the gauntlet of all 14, 15 certifications. So, I figured we'd bring her onto this call and we get a chance to pick her brain on how she achieved this monumental task and see if she has any tips and tricks for any of you guys, so that any of you who are looking to get the Golden Kubestronaut, I think this is the perfect person to ask questions to.
Sure, Sanjeev. Thank you. I'd be happy to share anything from my perspective and happy to answer any questions if you guys have any.
Yep. So what do I want to ultimately accomplish today? So there's a couple things that we are trying to accomplish. And the first thing is, since we're focusing on networking and service meshes, before you can even start to even look at those 2 things, I want to make sure that you guys have a good understanding of how networking works in Kubernetes. So you need to have a good foundation on how networking works within Kubernetes. You need to understand the Kubernetes networking model. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on the basics of how Kubernetes operates, how pods communicate, before we can really start diving into Cilium and Istio. Because if you don't understand the foundations, you're not going to start understanding some of the upper layers of this entire solution stack. On top of that, I want to make sure that you guys understand all of the things that are going to be encompassed in the exams. So make sure you guys understand the scope of the exams, the topics that are covered. Make sure you are, learning all of the things necessary to pass the exam, and not spending too much time on things that may not be included in the exam. I also want to provide, as many tips and tricks that I think would be helpful for you guys looking to pass these certifications. As well as any other time-saving tips and tricks that could ultimately help you guys pass the exam. And we'll also get a chance to see how, we have courses that will help prepare you for any of these certifications that you're looking to pass, especially for any of the certifications in the Golden Kubestronaut track. And I just want to show you guys how you can utilize these courses if you want to help better prepare for those exams. And we've made it so that these courses are very well aligned with the curriculum of those exams, as well as providing lots of hands-on labs, as well as mock exams that'll help simulate not only the questions that you'll see on the exam, but also the environment that you're going to be kind of faced with when you take the exam. So today, as I mentioned, we're going to start off by over some just quick basics of the Kubernetes networking model. And, so we're going to cover, like what's a kube proxy, talk about services and things like that. After that, we can then kind of build up to the next layer, which is learning about Cilium, which is a eBPF-based CNI. So we'll take a look at, core components of Cilium, see what makes it different from other CNIs, like it's like the fact that it's based on eBPF, which is a nice selling point of the solution. We'll go over the different topics that you need to know for the Cilium Certified Associate, as well as provide some few preparation strategies. From there, we can kind of continue on to the Istio. So we'll take a look at Istio, learn about service meshes, what are, why were they created, what features come with Istio, and take a look at a few other things related to not just Istio, but the certification. After that, I figured it would be good to provide, like a nice, I call it a troubleshooting playbook, but I like to think of it as a action plan. So whether you're learning Cilium or Istio, or just working with plain Kubernetes, I wanted to provide you guys kind of like a framework for how to go about troubleshooting issues, especially as it pertains to Cilium and Istio. But you'll see that the way that I kind of break it down, it's going to apply to any technology that you work with. So I think that'll be helpful for people that are working with this technology or looking to pursue the certification. I think that's going to be really helpful as to how to go about troubleshooting. I think a lot of people, when they're first learning, they have a tendency to kind of just spray and pray commands, and they don't really have a good action plan as to what they are looking for and what they need to troubleshoot. So I think this will be really helpful for you guys. And then I figured we would provide a 2-week guide. So like, if you're on the path, if you've scheduled a cert, whether it's Cilium or the Istio certification, I'm going to provide a 2-week study guide so that you guys can have a plan for all of the things that you should know and cover the last final 2 weeks before you ultimately take the exam. And I think this will increase the chances of you guys passing and achieving those certifications. So let's first start off with basics of Kubernetes networking. So we're not going to dive too deep into that because that's we could spend hours talking about all of the different components within Kubernetes and how networking works. But I just want to do a high-level overview and how, just focusing on things that are relevant to, Cilium and Istio. So the first thing is, you need to understand, what is a CNI. So Kubernetes does not implement networking itself. Kubernetes, the team that's built Kubernetes, they provide a framework or a bunch of rules of how networking should work, but they do not implement it. Instead, you have to bring your own networking solution. So we've got a lot of third-party vendors that have designed networking solutions for Kubernetes. They're referred to as CNIs or CNI plugins. And by having this kind of flexible model, you can have these different vendors come up with different methods on how to actually implement networking. And so you'll see, like with Cilium, one of the big things with Cilium when it first came out was that it was an eBPF-based solution. So they used a brand new technology to implement networking to make it so that all of the pods are able to communicate with one another. On top of that, you need to have a good understanding of services and ingresses. So if you don't know, services are how pods ultimately talk to one another, as well as how the outside world talks to the applications running inside your Kubernetes cluster. So you've got a cluster IP service. This is meant for pod-to-pod communication or internal to your cluster. And then if you want to expose any of your applications to the outside world, maybe you got a web application, that's when you would use node port and load balancer. And then you have ingress and gateway API, which provide the ability to kind of match on some of the upper layer protocols, match on certain HTTP headers and perform routing into your cluster. And then you have kubeproxy. So the kubeproxy, when you have services and when a pod wants to talk to another pod, it's going to be using services to communicate with one another. The way that these services are actually implemented under the hood is through a component called kubeproxy, which handles the routing and the load balancing to the various pods. So if you have like a database service that load balances to all of your database pods, the kubeproxy component is responsible for performing all of that load balancing. And if you're not really sure what or how it accomplishes that, which is kind of irrelevant to Cilium, it actually just uses standard Linux IP tables rules under the hood. So that's all it's really doing. It's just constantly updating IP table rules to forward traffic to your respective pods. So, you need to understand these points because it's going to help you understand, where Cilium fits into this greater picture and, where, something like Istio or a service mesh would fit in. So when it comes to, layer 3, layer 4 routing of the OSI model, so all of the standard IP routing, TCP, UDP load balancing, as well as network policy enforcement. So network policy is just about limiting which pods can talk to one another. This is all kind of done by your CNI. Your CNI is going to handle and make sure that routing is working within your cluster. You can implement load balancing. So this is a CNI, and Cilium is a CNI. So that's really what it's doing. That's its main goal, but obviously Cilium can also do more. Then you have some of the L7 features that you may want in your cluster. So HTTP routing, TLS termination, header manipulation, advanced traffic management. This is usually what's referred to as a service mesh. So service meshes provide, some of those features, and they kind of operate on the higher layer. So layer 7 working on the HTTP level or one of the upper layer protocols. Now, what gets a little bit confusing, because right now it looks like, okay, Cilium does all of the L3, L4 stuff. Service mesh like Istio handles L7 stuff. Cilium, even though it's a CNI, it also has some service mesh capabilities that you can enable. So it handles a lot of the L3, L4 stuff, and Cilium can also implement a lot of the L7 features. So there's a little bit of overlap between Cilium and Istio because it does have those built-in service mesh features, but you can also just run Cilium as just a plain CNI and also have Istio handle all of the service mesh functionalities. And on top of that, when we'll go over this a little bit later, is that Cilium has the ability to replace kubeproxy. So kubeproxy, or that's the component in Kubernetes that handles routing and load balancing to services. As I mentioned, it uses IP tables. And so there are certain limitations. So you'll see that Cilium has actually provided their own implementation of kubeproxy that's more efficient, that uses eBPF under the hood. Something that's really important to understand, especially when you take the Cilium certification. But this is really what I wanted to focus on. Make sure you understand the layers and how all of these different pieces fit together. And so from there, we can kind of move on to Cilium. So Cilium, it's a CNI. And what makes Cilium a little bit different than some other CNIs, it's not the only one that has done this, but Cilium leverages it's not necessarily new now, but a newish technology called eBPF, or Extended Berkeley Packet Filter. And so the whole idea behind eBPF is that it allows you to run programs in the kernel or at the kernel layer. And so instead of having an application running in user space, which has certain limitations, not quite as efficient, you can run applications in the kernel to perform various tasks, especially when it comes to implementing routing, load balancing. we could do all of this in the kernel. And so this is going to be a more efficient way of implementing a CNI. And you'll see that it also gives us a lot of built-in visibility for viewing and managing all of the traffic flowing through our system. So as I mentioned, one of the core capabilities with Cilium is that you could, first of all, swap out the built-in kube proxy component in Kubernetes. That's going to be a more, the one that provided by Cilium is going to be a little bit more efficient. It's going to use eBPF, so it's going to be operating in the kernel. It can implement all of those features in the kernel instead of relying on IP tables, which is very slow, right? In Kubernetes, you're going to constantly have pods that get spun up, spun back down. And when you're constantly doing that, you have to constantly update all of those IP table rules. And there are limitations that you can hit if you're operating at a certain scale. So you'll see that the eBPF-based implementation provided by Cilium, which is fully optional, you can continue to use kubeproxy, or you can use Cilium's implementation, which is technically going to scale up a little bit better. Now, network policies. Network policies are just like a lot of the other networking features in Kubernetes, they are implemented by the CNI. So Kubernetes has a native construct or object called a network policy, but Kubernetes doesn't implement itself. So your CNI has to have that functionality, which Cilium does. And so a standard network policy is just going to be about L3, L4 traffic, limiting who can talk to who on what ports. But Cilium also has a couple of extra custom resources that come with it. You've got the Cilium network policy, which is like a regular network policy, but a little bit more powerful. It allows you to match on more specific traffic. You can match on domains, services. So it's a little bit more flexible. And you have, cluster-wide network policies, which a standard network policy is going to be namespace-based, whereas a cluster-wide network policy is going to apply across the entire cluster. And on top of that, Cilium also has the ability to implement rules to match on certain L7 parameters, right? So if you're working with HTTP, you can also match on specific types of HTTP methods or headers or anything like that. So it has more features than your standard network policy implementation that you can use out of the box. The Hubble component of Kubernetes is what provides all of the visibility. And so, it's not just good enough to implement all of these features. You need to be able to troubleshoot. You need to be able to see what's going on. That's what Hubble does. Since this is all eBPF based, it's very easy for Cilium to see all of the traffic flows going through the system. It can just kind of tap into your NIC almost and just see all of the flows. And so you'll be able to see all of the flows flowing through it. And you'll see that Hubble actually gives you a lot of detail as to what's happening. So if a packet or a flow gets dropped, Hubble will actually tell you the reason why, right? It'll tell you what network policy is dropping it, what's preventing it from actually being able to communicate with another pod. Then you have encryption. So Cilium has built-in encryption functionality, and so it supports WireGuard or IPsec. On top of that, Cilium also has a feature called cluster mesh, which allows you to kind of connect multiple clusters together and have them kind of operating as one. And so it kind of connects the networking aspect of all of these clusters together. So I could actually have a service that's running on two different clusters. And so when a pod sends traffic to a service, it can load balance to all of the pods associated with that service in both clusters. So you can actually load balance to multiple clusters. And you'll see that Cilium supports multiple routing formats. So it can support basic tunneling using something like VXLAN, or you can actually use BGP to advertise routes into your physical network, and then ultimately avoiding encryption. Oh, sorry, not encryption, but encapsulation and some of the things associated with tunneling traffic through your physical network. So things to focus on for the exam. You want to make sure you understand eBPF. You don't need to know how to write an eBPF program, but you need to understand, why they ultimately decided to use that technology. What are the features, the benefits? You need to understand some of the abilities to replace kubeproxy, when and why would you do it, and what your system will look like when you have the kubeproxy replacement enabled versus when you don't. You need to understand the policy semantics and how Cilium uses identity-based policy enforcement. So understanding their security model, instead of using IP address-based security, you're using identity-based security. You need to understand the Hubble architecture, all of the components that make up the Hubble solution, whether it's the Hubble relay, the Hubble UI, and how to actually look at the flows and interpret all of the policy decisions that you see within Hubble. And then you need to understand the different encryption and routing modes, as well as any version-specific features and kernel requirements necessary to actually get Cilium and eBPF to work. So, some common questions that you might see would be like, there's a certain scenario of, you want to allow and prevent certain traffic from one pod to another. So you have to then select the correct policy that can implement that. They might show you some logs from Hubble, and you need to identify why a packet might be getting dropped. And then they could be asking, very specific feature questions like about, how to enable the kube proxy replacement functionality or any of the other many features provided by Cilium. All right, so now I'm going to hand it over to Anthony, and he's going to be talking about Istio.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Hey, everyone. So now that we know what the CNI is and Cilium, let's talk about a service mesh Istio. Now, there are other service meshes. Istio is not the only one. But for the Istio specific, we have a control plane and we have a data plane. Now, the control plane manages the configurations, policies. It's the certificate authority, and it configures the Envoy proxies dynamically. And the data plane is the actual sidecar, the Envoy. Istio does use Envoy proxy, which you could use, I guess, on its own without Istio. But think of Istio as the orchestrator for these Envoy proxies. And these sidecars are mounted alongside the application. The other, I guess, it's just another pod. And it will intercept all incoming and outgoing traffic. It will enforce the network policies. It will collect some logs for observability. And obviously, the big one is we'll implement some layer 7 features. There are a few, custom resource definitions that you will definitely need to understand and know in order to take the ICA. So virtual services, destination rules, sidecars themselves, gateways, service entries, workloads, are just some of the objects that you will need to know. Now, a virtual service is essentially very similar to a Kubernetes service, except you're intercepting traffic there, and you can manipulate and make decisions based on certain conditions. So if a header matches something, do something. If it's landing on a / login, for example, do something else. You could do a lot of really cool things with virtual services. Destination rules is once I intercept that traffic, you have the ability to essentially send traffic to other places. I know the virtual services, I already said that it does that, but the destination rule allows you to create basically you can do mirroring with that traffic, and you can set a specific port to send it to a destination rule. So really important. The sidecar object is the actual Envoy, and you can configure the sidecar to override Istio's default behavior. So you can, I guess by default, Istio allows traffic in and out, passive. But with the sidecar configuration, you can actually override that and say, for this namespace, I don't want to just accept traffic from anyone. I want to be specific on which namespaces they can send traffic to. We also have the gateways, right? So we have internal, ingress gateways and egress gateways. Ingress is you're allowing traffic to come in from the outside world. And egress is you want to go through this egress gateway in order to get out to the internet. And the reason you want to do that is to have, obviously, observability on what's going out of the mesh, and also, obviously knowing what's coming into the mesh. So as far as the traffic management, one of the main focuses of the ICA is the canary deployments. So, knowing how to upgrade, I guess, should say how to test different deployments using Istio. So you could have something like version 1 and a version 2, and you can split, I don't know, 90% traffic to the old version and start sending 10% to the new version of it, and then that way you could test it. There's also I guess, the mirroring feature, which allows you to send just as much traffic to V1 as into V2. And this is a really cool feature by Istio because it allows you to actually test a new version without taking production down, and also testing production, I guess, traffic. You always get into that, I guess, scenario where you're testing a different version, but you're doing some just load testing, or you're using some test users to send traffic to, so you don't really know what the impact is going to be. Istio has this mirroring feature that allows you to send it to both V1 and V2, and that way you're not really guessing what's going to happen when we go to V2, which I think is really cool. Istio has also retries, timeouts for that you can implement on your application. So if you want to have the application do retries because it got, I don't know, a 500, it can retry again. You can actually implement specific timeouts. And you can do a lot of the rate limiting options are there, and Istio is able to implement that. Fault injection, and which is a big one. So you can actually start, I guess, in a way, do your chaos monkey and start doing purpose, I guess, implement faults to see how your application would behave. I think we always get into, in most companies anyway, where we I guess, prepare for the worst, but we don't actually implement the worst to see what would actually happen. So that fault injection is really cool. The security features on Istio, so we have MTLS now. Mutual TLS is not enforced by default. You can enforce it and have Istio only accept MTLS traffic, and that happens with the sidecar. Once the sidecar is injected into the workload, and the other sidecar also, the other workload also has a sidecar. These two services can communicate with each other via MTLS because the sidecars are always intercepting traffic, encrypting it, and sending it to one another. So you can enable that across the whole mesh, but by default, it is set to a permissive mode, which would allow both plain text and encrypted traffic. Once you, I guess, enable your I guess MTLS, you can go further down and actually start creating I guess more in-depth authorization policies. So can service A hit service B? Yes, but on what port, and what are the methods? Should it be able to do a get? Should it be able to do a put? And you can actually do a fine-grained, I guess, policy in order, I guess, to adopt that whole zero trust terminology. You can do validation on a bunch of things, as obviously service accounts, JSON web tokens, etc. Now, I do want to mention that the ICA is based on the sidecar model. Istio also has an ambient mode. It's not new, but it's, I guess, newish. However, Istio certification just went through an upgrade in August, I believe, and it has some ambient stuff, not much. It still is heavily focused on the sidecar model. So when preparing for the exam, it's important that you focus more on the sidecar model rather than the ambient sidecar list. Now, the ICA is is different to the Cilium certification. If you've ever taken any of the Kubernetes ones, it's very similar to that. It is hands-on. There used to be multiple choice questions, not anymore. It's all hands-on, and you will be asked to do a lot of things like installing Istio with different profiles, different, I guess, CPU memory requirements. You'll be asked to implement traffic, splitting traffic using percentage, mirroring could be in there. You will be asked to configure authorization and authorization policies, or implement them, and to make sure that traffic is locked down between services. You obviously be asked to create a lot of these sources. And another big one is debug Istio itself. So they might have broken something on purpose, and your job is to start troubleshooting and seeing where the issue is. And that brings me to a really important point. So in order to take the Istio certification, you do need to obviously know Kubernetes quite well. You should be very comfortable with the kubectl or kubectl, however you want to call it, because that's definitely important. You need to understand how services work, because they will throw a curveball in there and maybe change the port on a service, and you'll definitely need to know how to do that. And I think that's it for the Istio service mesh. You want to change slides for me, Sanjeev? All right, so as Sanjeev already talked what Cilium is, now you know what Cilium is and now what Istio is. You can use them together, as Sanjeev already discussed. And how this would work is Cilium, your CNI, it would be focused more on the layer 3, layer 4. So it would handle the pod networking. So you can use this as an IPAM, right? The IP address management. And you can also replace the default kube proxy that, whatever provider you're going with, you can use Cilium now to replace that, and then handle all that layer 3 and layer 4 capabilities, and then install Istio and use and get, I guess, Istio's best features as far as layer 7, right? So we're talking about fault tolerance, fault injection, mirroring, being specific on layer 7 authorization policies, and all of those great features that Istio has. And now you can combine them, and you have a pretty good stack as far as the benefits of eBPF with Cilium, and the benefits of these advanced features with Istio. Some of the I guess what's critical to know when you're implementing in this is when issues happen, I guess. If you're experiencing any sort of network drops, any connectivity issues, you want to probably focus more on Cilium, and you probably want to see what the issue is in there, because it is a layer 3, layer 4 issue. So it's important to kind of know the difference between both, and when to look at one or the other. If it's, I guess, a 500 error, 404 not found, or authorization deny, maybe it's landing somewhere else. Now you know this is a layer 7 capability, and you're looking into Istio more than you are looking at Cilium. But they work really well together. You're getting really the best of both worlds. One thing to consider, though, is that when you are using I guess Istio's sidecar model, not the ambient mode, you are adding some latency on it, right? And it's typically 1 to 3 milliseconds. But the trade-off is you're getting that layer 7 capability. I guess understanding the trade-offs is really important, right? If you want it to be, I guess, a lot faster, then maybe you want to adapt the ambient mode, and you're not having to do this sidecar model. But I think the trade-off is worth it. And I'll send it back to you, Sanjeev.
All right, great. Thanks. All right, so now what we have is, I talked about this earlier, how I wanted to kind of create a action plan for how to troubleshoot issues for Cilium as well as for Istio. Because I find that a lot of people just struggle with troubleshooting, and if you don't really have experience of deeply troubleshooting anything, you usually don't have a good framework or mental model on how to actually go about troubleshooting. But once you do, you can apply this to all technologies, regardless of what field you're operating in. So let's say you have an issue, and we're going to be kind of focusing on Cilium on this slide. But once again, you're going to follow the same steps regardless of what technology you're working with. if you have an issue, let's say a pod can't talk to another pod or something, there's a variety of issues, but let's just kind of keep it simple with a basic connectivity issue. The first thing that you always do is verify the issue. So this would mean, two pods can't talk to another. Take a look at the pods, right? So look at the pods and look for an easy win, right? An easy win when troubleshooting issues, if two pods can't talk to one another or an application's down, just check to see if the simplest thing is happening, which is the pod is down, or something very easy or obvious, there's an issue with the service. So do a kubectl get pod, get service, take a look at what has been deployed and try to draw out how everything is supposed to work when it's working. You need to understand how things are supposed to work, the path that packets take when it's working for you to actually troubleshoot problems. If you don't know how it's supposed to look when it's working, then you don't know what to look for when it's broken. So that's going to be, the basic things of Kubernetes, taking a look at the pods, taking a look at the services, and then verifying the issue, right? So always verify the issue yourself. Somebody reports an issue, there's an issue with the application or they can't connect, verify it yourself and get as many details as you can. So if it's two pods can't talk to one another, great, log into the pod and verify it and get some more details like what direction is connectivity broken. Sometimes it's just one direction. If you want to send a ping, you got to make sure you have connectivity both directions. So take a look. Sometimes it'll be that from one pod to another, things aren't working. And then from one pod to another, things are working. So get as many details as you can as to what is happening. What are the symptoms of the issue? Because that's going to give you some ideas as to what's exactly happening. So after you've taken a look at the obvious things like the pods and the services and you've verified the issue, now we have to dive in a little bit more deeper. So with Cilium, if there's a networking issue, it could be due to Cilium as that's responsible for the networking. You're going to want to take a look at and verify Cilium itself. Let's just make sure that Cilium is operating and there's no major and obvious issues with Cilium itself. So these are, once again, what I would consider easy wins that you want to look for. If the Cilium agent is down, this is easy, right? Like we got to figure out why it's down, but at least we know why it's broken. So take a look at the Cilium pods. So, as you study for the exam, you'll have a good understanding of the Cilium architecture. You'll understand, what pods will get deployed when you deploy Cilium. So you need an agent running on every single node that's going to be deployed as a daemon set. You're going to have the operator. You're going to have a couple of other things for Hubble and a few other things. But you want to make sure you take a look at all of the pods and all of the resources, and that can include other things like services and whatnot, that were deployed part of the Cilium solution. Verify that everything looks good. If you want, you can just do something as simple as running the Cilium CLI and running the Cilium status command, which will, do a quick little check on your system to make sure things are all right. It's going to be doing a lot of the similar things to, taking a look at the pods and the services and making sure that they're up and running. Obviously, if you see something wrong when you run Cilium status, then it's going to be probably a fairly straightforward issue and a simple fix. If it's not, then you could start diving into the logs of the system. So if you can do a kubectl logs and take a look at the logs of the Cilium agent, the operator. These are all, once again, what I would consider kind of like easy wins, where it's like sometimes the logs are pretty straightforward and they just tell you what's happening. Now, if the logs don't show anything wrong, well, then now we got to take it one step further. Now we have to figure out why a packet's getting dropped, because we are assuming that the system is working as it should. So this is where Hubble comes into play. So Cilium provides this observability tool. You can take a look at traces. It's got immense filtering capability. So if there's an issue between two pods or to a certain IP address or port, you can filter down as much as you want. And you can even match on dropped packets. So you can match on dropped packets or dropped flows, and it'll show you those packets that were dropped, and it'll tell you why they were dropped. And they'll tell you what network policy dropped them, right? Because, a networking issue could point to a issue with a misconfigured network policy, or you just not kind of understanding what these network policies are supposed to do. So at that point, if it tells you the network policy, you can then go and take a look at the network policy and see what rules could be kind of breaking your connectivity. And if everything still looks good, well, now you're going to have to do a little bit more deeper in-depth diving into, what Cilium is doing under the hood. You're going to have to be taking a look at the endpoints. Are they getting discovered properly? Are we properly applying identities to each of the different pods? If the identity isn't properly applied, then obviously the network policy is not going to work because it's going to misclassify it as the wrong type of identity. And so these are kind of the steps that you can take to troubleshooting these issues, but you always want to take it kind of step by step. Always verify the issue yourself. And that's the most important part, because every time you verify, you usually get a few more details. You want to look for the quick and easy, obvious things. Take a look at the pods, take a look at the services, understand what it's supposed to look like when it's working, and look for things that don't point to how it should look when it was ultimately working. And then from there, you can just dive further into Cilium, verifying Cilium looks good, taking a look at the flows, whatever observability tool you have. You could have other observability tools as well. And then diving into network policies as well as into the internals of Cilium to make sure it's doing something right. It could also be a bug within Cilium or something else that's running in your system. All right, so that's kind of the playbook for Cilium. Now we're going to have Anthony walk you through the kind of the similar playbook, but for troubleshooting Istio.
All right. Yeah, go ahead. So I think some of the stuff that Sanjeev was talking about, it actually fits perfectly into Istio. Now, one of the big ones is obviously making sure that the pods are up and running. I think that's probably the first one you want to check. The next one you want to check is to make sure that obviously Istio is running. So you can do the get pods -Istio system to make sure that you see the Istio D there and it is running. If it's having issues, you obviously know that this is an Istio issue. Checking the version. And this is really important for the Istio exam because they might ask you to install a different version. So the way that you install it, I mean, aside from the GitOps approach, obviously, you want to download the Istio CTL version and then install Istio D or Istio itself into the cluster, and it depends on which version you have. So Istio CTL version is a good, I guess, identification to show you what your CLI is and what the cluster Istio version, what the version of Istio that is running on the cluster. The Istio CTL proxy status, that will show you, give you a good idea of where, I guess, the pods are sending their traffic to if Istio is enabled. And then the logs themselves, they give you a lot of information when it comes to, I guess, intercepting and incoming traffic and outgoing traffic. Next step, please. So the sidecar injection, this is actually very important when it comes to the exam because they will ask you to do something and you don't want to assume that Istio is already enabled. So one of the big ones is to get the namespace and show the labels. Again, we're going with a sidecar model. The namespace should have the Istio injection enabled. If it doesn't, you already know that you have to enable that first, restart the workloads for the sidecars to be injected. Unfortunately, it's not dynamic, so you can't have running workloads in a namespace, label your namespace, and then have that sidecar automatically inject. You're going to have to restart those workloads so that Istio knows to inject those sidecars. So it's really important that you do that. After every, I guess I would really recommend after every question that you do, you want to run Istio CTL analyze -n, and then whatever the namespace is that you're working on. Istio will pick up on errors, syntax errors, or something that's missing. Maybe you set a virtual service and it's depending on something, but that resource doesn't even exist yet. Istio CTL analyze will pick that up, and you can easily identify what you need to do in your next step, and you're not dropping valid points. So I recommend that you get into the habit of running Istio CTL analyze. And just for troubleshooting, just in general, every time I have an issue, someone says something about Istio, my first go-to is the analyze that namespace, because more often than not, it will pick up something someone implemented, something that is not working correctly, and I can identify right away. So really important a command. Obviously, describe pod you want to grep for Istio there, I guess, to see if Istio is enabled. Now, you can pass annotations in a pod to, I guess, disable Istio. And So if you're ever in a situation where the namespace is Istio enabled, but that specific pod is not getting the sidecar, you probably want to run the describe pod and check to see if Istio, for any annotation in Istio, and you can actually disable it at the pod level. So everything else has the sidecar injected except this one pod. So really important command. Next, please. Yeah, the proxy configuration. This is very important when you want to see a pod to see which proxy configuration it's hitting. So one of the ones that you'll definitely need this for is if they're asking you to do a canary deployment or a canary upgrade, I should say, in Istio version. So you have 1.25.3 and you're going to 1.26.3. And your goal is to upgrade to the new version of that. Running Istio proxy config will give you the details of what version of the Istio that cluster, that pod, for example, is listening to. You can also use it for the routes, the endpoints, and if you're having, I guess, any issues with between services not communicating with each other, this is a really good tool, a CLI, to be able to debug that a little bit further. Do we have any more, Sanjeev? Sorry. Yeah, thanks. Traffic policies. This is very important. So you always want to do the get kubectl get virtual services. Notice that you don't use istioctl to get these Istio resource, these CRDs. You're obviously using kubectl. So getting your virtual services, listing them out, getting your destination rules, your gateways, -A to see all of them. Again, the istioctl analyze is to see that istioctl has been installed correctly. The kubectl peer authentication and authorization policies. I would say that both those, the first and third, are really important just to make sure that you actually created that resource. So the question says, create this virtual services. You applied it. Just run it again and make sure. Run kubectl get virtual services to confirm that you created that resource. Rather than just applying it and then sort of trusting that it was applied, because you could have applied it in the wrong namespace, which will cost you points. So definitely getting into the habit of of listing these resources for Istio in order to be in order for I guess to confirm 100% that resource is in there. The Istio CTL experiment is also a really good way to see what I guess proxy the specific pod and then in that specific namespace is hitting what endpoints. It gives you a lot of information about that specific one. I believe it also gives you authorization policies that might be applied to that pod, if I'm not mistaken. Next, please. Logs, obviously, really important, not just the pod logs themselves, but the logs of the Istio proxy inside of that pod. So that sidecar, checking to make sure that you're getting traffic in there. And if you're not, and it's not catching anything, then there's something obviously wrong with that Istio sidecar proxy. You should always see logs in these metrics coming into this sidecar. And it's collecting that, and you could use that with what Sanjeev already talked about, Hubble, and then they work really well together. Next, please. So debugging mutual TLS. So yeah, again, we talked about enabling, I guess, MTLS globally, or by default, it's permissive. So it'll accept plain text and MTLS. But if there is a question about debugging a tool, I think the first my first go-to is to check the peer authentications across all the namespaces or across that specific one. And if that workload is in that, you have an idea of what's happening. You can then output it to a YAML output and then have a look at what this peer authentication is set to. What else? Yep, you can also obviously describe the pod. and seeing if obviously Istio is enabled. Again, if it's not enabled and you're trying to get to another service that is enforcing MTLS, well, then traffic is not going to be able to go, because remember, once you enable, I guess, a peer authentication or MTLS on one namespace, it'll only accept traffic from another workload that also has MTLS enabled. And if that workload doesn't have it, it's just going to drop traffic. You don't really need to worry too much about the certificates. The control plane takes care of that. It's a certificate authority, and it will assign certificates on startup to these workloads. But in the event that you do need to troubleshoot and you are getting some, I guess, some TLS permissions issues, you can use the Istio auth TLS check. Now, I know that the Istio with the new version, especially 126.3, has changed a bit. So that just make sure that you check, because Istio changed a bit and all those options might not be there anymore. But if it is, you can use the auth TLS check to check for that. And also the last one you can go is actually into the proxy itself within that pod, and then use OpenSSL just like you would in any pod, and to see if that proxy can get to that endpoint. So it's not always just the pod itself. It's also the proxy, because all the traffic will just be routed through the proxy anyway. So you're sort of bypassing the whole pod issue. If it's not getting out, test it from the proxy itself, and you'll be able to confirm if traffic can leave the mesh. I think that's it. Sending back to you, Sanjeev.
All right, thank you for that, Anthony. That was super helpful. So now, let's say that you've scheduled your Cilium exam, and it's coming up in 2 weeks. I wanted to give you guys a study plan for your final 2 weeks of studying to make sure that you have everything that you need to pass the certification, and give you a breakdown on some of the things that you should kind of recap on a day-to-day basis, just so you guys can have some sort of blueprint that you can kind of follow. So week one, the first couple days, we'll say day 1 through 3, you want to focus on starting with the basics as usual. So make sure you have a good understanding of Cilium. What is it? Why do we need it? And also understanding the overall architecture of Cilium. So what is the agent? What is the operator? What are the different components that make up Hubble? What is the Envoy proxy that's used within Cilium? And when do you use it? Because not all the time, you won't always have that Envoy proxy. You need to have an understanding of eBPF. Why was it created? Why did the people that created Cilium ultimately choose to use eBPF? And you need to understand when eBPF is used. So there are limitations with eBPF, mainly being eBPF can really only help L3 and L4. So for some of the L7 features, you're going to need that Envoy proxy. So it's important that you guys understand that, and you understand when each of these components kind of get used. And then you need to understand how communication works with Cilium. How does a pod communicate with another pod? When does eBPF kick in? How does a pod in one node talk to a pod in another node? And so that's going to be, potentially using something like VXLAN, or if you're using direct routing, then you're not going to be encapsulating the traffic. So really the first couple of days, make sure you focus on the overall architecture. You will get a lot of questions on that. And I think those are some of the easier questions, right? Architecture is usually not that difficult. So you want to make sure you get as many points as you can on the easy stuff. Following that, you can move on to services and network policies. So you need to understand how services work in Kubernetes and understand how to implement a network policy. And that's going to include regular network policies, Cilium network policies, and cluster-wide network policies. You need to understand the extra features that Cilium provides you when creating network policies, some of the extra things you can match on versus traditional network policies. Make sure you understand the differentiators of Cilium. And you also need to know how to, kind of troubleshoot them, even though it is a multiple choice-based exam. They might say like, this pod can't communicate with this pod, and then they'll show you some policies and ask you like, why is this not working? So that's going to kind of wrap up the first week. The second week, then we can start off by focusing on Hubble. You need to understand the different components of Hubble, relay, UI, CLI. You need to know how to use the CLI to see all of the flows, filter the flows down so you know what you see on your screen isn't full of a bunch of noise that you don't care about, and then how to properly interpret the flow results. How do we match on traffic that's passed or dropped? These are all things that you need to know. And, you know, a lot of times they'll give you the outputs of these flows and they'll ask you, like, you know, what's happening? What is the end result? Did the packet get dropped? You need to be able to interpret them. Day 8 through 9, this is about security and identity. So Cilium uses a identity-based security model. So instead of using IP addresses, which have limitations, it uses identity. You need to actually know that for the exam. You'll get some questions about that. You need to understand the different security-based features that they have, whether it's MTLS, encryption with WireGuard or IPsec. You have to know all of the different options that you have available for that. Day 10 through 11. So this is going to be more troubleshooting specific things. So what are the different commands that you have to troubleshoot Cilium further? What about connecting to the agent and running the CLI utility within the agent to get more information on endpoints, or even taking a look at eBPF maps? Now, for the exam, they don't really go too heavy into eBPF, so you don't necessarily need to know that. But you know, especially in our course, we try to make sure it's as thorough as possible. So it's always a good idea to understand kind of what's happening under the hood. But you don't need to be an expert at eBPF. You don't even need to know some of the more advanced commands or anything like that. Really, just the Cilium troubleshooting commands that you need to have. And then you also need to know some of the other features like cluster mesh and how you can connect multiple clusters together from a networking perspective. And then finally, before the exam, I definitely recommend you get some last minute practice, run a few commands, and also take a mock exam. So mock exams are always beneficial because they give you an idea as to the type of question that you might see. Because no matter how well you know a topic, sometimes if you don't have exposure to certain wordings or certain types of questions that get worded in certain ways, it could throw you off. So even if you know the material, you could still struggle with it. Always take a mock exam. It's going to help give you an idea as to the type of questions you have, and it'll make you feel more comfortable on the day of the exam. So that's the Cilium 2-week sprint. We also have one for Istio. Anthony, if you want to take over for that.
Sure, yeah. So go ahead. So yeah, week 1, I guess days 1 to 3, you want to focus on understanding what Istio is. And you know, more or less the core components. So you want to know what the control plane does, what the data plane does, you know, what Istio-D is, the Envoy proxy itself, understanding what Envoy is, understanding ingress and egress gateways, and you know, how traffic flows through inside of the service mesh. So how do the sidecars intercept that traffic and you know, incoming and outgoing traffic. On the following days, yeah, you want to focus on the routing, the traffic management. And I will say that a good chunk of the whole exam is focused around this specific, I guess, days 4 and 5. And that is all your custom resource definition. So the virtual services, pretty important. I would say that a handful of questions are going to have a virtual service in one way or another. Destination rules, you know, gateway, traffic splitting. We already talked about that 90, 100, or 50-50 if you want to do. Fault injection. So you want to implement retries and delays, timeouts, and how to set up an ingress and an egress gateway. That's probably going to be on the exam as well. And again, focus a lot on that traffic management, because all of the questions will have one of those CRDs that you see in there. On the next week, I guess in the following week, you can start focusing on securing traffic. So another big part of the exam, but not as big as the traffic management. So you need to understand what MTLS is and why it's important to use it, what peer authentication is, which is enabling essentially MTLS. We need to know authorization policies, really adopting that zero trust model that we talked about. JSON web token authentication, It's important to know how it works. They're not going to give you something really, complicated like that in the exam, but understanding how it works is very, very important. Following that, we can focus on, I guess, telemetry, observability. So I will say that this is not actually on the exam. The Istio, the ICA doesn't focus on observability, not when I did it, and I did both versions. But it's important to know, right? So it's important to be able to, implement that with something like Kiali, obviously Hubble, and using Istio CTL CLI command. Very important because you're going to be using the Istio CTL throughout the whole the exam. Next, please. Big one right here, troubleshooting. The ICA does definitely focus on troubleshooting. So you're going to have to be able to troubleshoot sidecar injection issues. So why is the sidecar not working, or service A can contact service B. So that type of troubleshooting is really important. Gateways connecting as well. They will expect you to be able to configure, set up incoming traffic, and also set up observability for outgoing traffic. And finally, in the last few days, you can obviously review and practice all of the pieces that I said. Again, focusing on traffic management, authorization, and troubleshooting, very important. One thing that we didn't, that's not covered here, I guess it's the different versions of Istio, like not versions, but the sidecar and the ambient mode. Ambient mode, they're not going to really ask you anything with ambient mode, aside from maybe just installing it on one of their nodes, and then you move on to a next question and you kind of don't touch ambient mode. But it's important to know ambient mode. It's only going to be adapted more and more. Going through the mock exams, like Sanjeev said, very, very important. We have 2 mock exams. We have version 1, which was based on the previous version of the exam, and then version 2, which is based more on the second version of it. All hands-on. Remember, you do have access to the online documentation, just like you do with the CKA, CKD, and CKS. So you're not completely thrown into the deep end and expected to know all of these configurations. You do get the documentation, but going through these mock exams will prepare you really well for it. That's it for Istio Sprint.
All right. Thank you for that, Anthony. So I do want to highlight that the 2 certifications, the Cilium and Istio, are very different. Cilium is a multiple choice based question exam. You guys are already familiar with this. There's, a lot of the certifications in the track are multiple choice question based, whereas Istio is a hands-on. And I think we all can agree, hands-on exams are usually a little bit more difficult. Not just because you really have to understand how to do it. They have verifications, but also just you have to kind of deal with the environment. You're working with a single monitor. So, one of the things that we wanted to do, especially when we design our courses, is that we want to try to make it as realistic as possible and get you prepared for the type of questions and environments that you might see on the actual exam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly pull up our course for Cilium, and after that, Anthony can actually take you through the Istio course. But I want to show you guys just kind of a breakdown of how we've kind of set up this course to kind of match up with the curriculum for the actual certification, and show you at the end the mock exams that we have, which are based off of the type of questions that you would see on the exam itself. So, with the Cilium, the mock exam is going to be multiple choice because that's the type of questions you're going to see on the exam, whereas Istio is going to have a more hands-on based mock exam, because that's, once again, the type of question you're going to see. So if you go to our platform, first of all, if you ever want, you can go to Learning Paths and then select Golden Kubestronaut. This is going to show you all of the courses that we have that are relevant to the Golden Kubestronaut, whether it's, for a specific certification in the track, or maybe you just want a basic introduction before you even get started with one of those certifications. But we'll go down here, and we can see the Cilium Certified Associate course. And if you take a look at the content, right? We're going to start off with an overview, right? So this is going to be, just a basic overview of how networking works. Because once again, as we covered in this session, you need to know the basics before you can do anything else. We'll then go over Cilium, its features, its architecture. You definitely need to know some, eBPF basics. From there, we'll then go on to installing and configuring. So this is going to show you the different methods that you need to know how to install Cilium. The exam will test you on not just using the CLI, but also using Helm for installation. Then you can explore some of the other features within Cilium, see how IPAM or IP address management works, the different routing modes, how to enable the kube-proxy replacement, and even a detailed packet walk. We'll actually take a look at and see what a packet looks like as it traverses a system, and we'll even see what eBPF is doing under the hood. Then we'll move on to network policies. So we'll take a look at basic network policies, their limitations, and why Cilium added enhancements on top of that. And we'll even eventually cover cluster mesh network policies, which comes up in a later section. We'll then take a look at the features that Cilium provides that are kind of service meshy. So you'll see, its own gateway API and ingress implementations. You'll see how to implement encryption and MTLS. You'll see how to connect multiple clusters together using cluster mesh. We've got a section on observability, a section on how to configure and work with BGP. So Cilium will actually act as a BGP router. It can advertise routes out to your physical network. We have a section on optimizations, and then the mock exam that I really wanted to highlight. So this mock exam I think it's really important. It's probably one of the best tools that you'll have to preparing for the exam, because it's going to give you an idea as to the type of questions that you'll have. So if we go here, I've already started up the mock exam. So Cilium, multiple choice based question. So you're going to see questions like this. A team wishes to run a blue-green deployment, half the pods on cluster A and half on cluster B. They all want service consumers from both clusters to be able to reach either set. What must be done to ensure this behavior uses the cluster mesh? So these are the type of questions that you're going to see. You can go ahead and select, cluster mesh is usually the solution when you're trying to, connect a service across multiple clusters. Hit submit, go to the next question. And, just like the exam, you've got 60 questions. So we try to make it look and feel as much like the actual exam and the type of questions you would see on there. So Anthony, you want to take over and walk them through the Istio?
Sure. Yeah.
And also, I guess to keep in mind, I guess I didn't show you guys this, and Anthony will show you what they look like. But even though the Cilium certification is a multiple choice based question exam, the course, we still have lots of hands-on labs. We still believe hands-on is the best way to learn. We're going to have as many hands-on labs as possible, even in that scenario.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Yeah, for sure. So let's go over what I guess is in the ICA. So the course is really based around what the Istio, the ICA is based on. First, we're going to start off obviously by talking what Istio is, introduction, prerequisites. Really important, right? You don't want to take this course or the certification if you're not very comfortable with Kubernetes. Very, very important that you know Kubernetes really well. I would even say that if you have your CKA at least, you're probably ready to take on the ICA. If you don't, I would probably focus more on the Kubernetes side first before you step into Istio. We then talk about sidecar, right? We talk about the Envoy proxy being the proxy that Istio orchestrates. Then we move on to actually talking about the Istio service mesh itself, and the control plane, data plane, the ambient mode. We talk about the differences between both these models, but it doesn't like the exam isn't really based on the ambient mode for now. Who knows what's going to happen, and they're going to upgrade it. Maybe they will. After that, we actually go into installing Istio itself. So these are all, by the way, labs. There's a lot of labs in this Istio course because it is a hands-on exam. We tried to do various labs. So we install Istio in various ways. So we do CLI, we do it with Helm, and we do it with the operator. I can't find it right now, but maybe this one right here, the customized installation. So that will be the operator, and that's essentially using a YAML file to install Istio rather than using like Helm install or Istio install. We're using kubectl apply, and then we're passing in that YAML file. So really, really important, the operator. We then go talk, we go into, I guess, the Canary release and how to upgrade Istio, how to move from version X to Y. So important, we have our quizzes and we have our labs as well. So after installing, we then dig into really the big chunk or the main section of it. And we go into sidecars, we talk about virtual services, destination rules, gateways, all of the custom resource definition. There's a demo and a lab for each. So you're able to see how I did it, and then you're able to do that on the labs. We have a mirroring one right here, the circuit breaking. And you'll notice that this section right here really has a big part of the whole exam. Again, the ICA is mostly based on the traffic management. There is a lot of content in here and a lot of labs, but definitely really important. And one of the new parts, I guess, that we added here is also the ambient mode for traffic management. Now, like I said, ambient mode is not in the ICA, at least not yet. But I do show you the differences of doing things with ambient mode. If you were to install ambient mode on your end and you're trying to, I guess, implement some of the sidecar features, sidecar model features into this ambient mode, they don't work as seamlessly, as transparent as you would think. It requires a little bit more, which is probably why they didn't include it in the new exam. Yeah, so we have here 2 quizzes on the traffic management. We move on to securing workloads. Again, big part of the exam. We talk about authentication and authorization, right? So one is, are you authorized to be here? Yes. Okay. And then the other one is, now that you're authorized, what are you actually allowed to do? And that's what the authorization actually focuses on. I also discussed the ambient mode, I guess, features, or I should say how the authorization works with ambient mode compared to the sidecar mode. We go into the troubleshooting. This is a big chunk of it. They don't have multiple choice questions anymore. The first version of it used to, and it was very difficult because it was very long and hard. I think it was like 22 hands-on question and 5 multiple choice. I'm happy to announce that this version is a lot easier than the previous version. And I think Nourhan will tell you just how the first one was. So the troubleshooting focuses on, what kind of issues they're going to throw at you. We don't really have a lab for that, but you do get it in the mock exams. My personal tips and tricks on how to pass the exam. And then we have the final exam. So mock exam 1 is based on the V1 of this ICA certification. And then the new mock exam 2 is based on the new version of the exam. And now I already started the lab here for mock exam. So this is maybe a question that you might get. So they might ask you, like, enforce MTLS in the hello namespace for workloads with the label app. So one of the first things that you're going to see that you don't get right here is you're going to get links. And I think this is really nice that they did this for the V2, because in V1, now again, you have access to the documentation, but they weren't doing you any favors. They weren't giving you links to say, this is what we're talking about. In this new version of the V2, you will see links. It'll say maybe peer authentication or authentication, and it will send you to a link like this. So you kind of already know what they're talking about. You don't have to sort of guess. And more importantly, you don't have to use the search bar, because in V1, you kind of were wasting a bit of time coming over here and looking at it. Now you get right to this link. You're able to see things. So for example, I can just kind of copy this guy. Let's go back in here. And it says in the hello namespace. So I'm just going to do peer authentication.yaml. Copy this. And I don't think we need to do, I think it's they don't say any name, but they do say it's in the hello namespace, right? And then we're going to do selector labels app equals hello. And let's do hello here. And now I can do kubectl apply-fpa. And if I do kubectl get peer authentications in the hello namespace, I get it. I'm going to do istio analyze in the hello namespace, and no issues. So that is sort of something you're going to be coming into experiencing with the ICA. Now, they don't do it all in one host, I should say. You could just see here that we're into this control plane. If I go to the next question, I'm still in the control plane node just because of the way that our labs are set up. In the ICA, they're actually going to give you two different hosts for every question. So one of the things that I focused on the tips of this course is that, and I believe that's somewhere in here, is that you always remember to exit out of that terminal and then SSH into the new node, because what will happen if you don't is you might start getting issues where you didn't exit that terminal and you continue on to the next question, but that question was supposed to be done on another host. So a little bit different, but yeah, that sums up sort of what you are expected to do for this ICA. I'll send it back to you, Sanjeev.
All right. So just to give you guys a heads up, there is a promotion or a promotional discount. So we have a 30% discount if you use the code 30 code. So that'll give you 30% off on both the Cilium and the Istio certifications. And, you know, like all Linux Foundation exams or certifications, you always get a retake. So you get one free retake. You mess up your first attempt, you'll always get a second one, which I think is awesome. So you know, you can always reserve both of them till the end, or sometimes, you know, like one of the things I like to do is I like to take one earlier on, just to get an idea as to, you know, what I might see, and then finally take the second one when I get a chance. But personal preference, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that discount. Also, on top of that, if you guys haven't checked out, we have a, and let me zoom in for you guys. We have a Golden Kubestronaut leaderboard. So this is a place where you can, you know, log in. You can keep track of all of the certifications and the progress you've made toward achieving your Golden Kubestronaut, and you can take a look at all of the other people also pursuing a Golden Kubestronaut. So you can see here we've actually got 6 different people that have already achieved a Golden Kubestronaut status, including our very own Nourhan. Once again, congratulations on that. But you can actually drill down and see like who's, you know, working on and studying for or have already achieved a certain certification. So, you know, we covered Cilium. Here you could see all of the people inside the leaderboard that have already successfully passed it. So it's just a nice place where you can kind of keep track and provide some accountability to yourself and see what everyone else is working on and what they've kind of progressed towards. So we'll add the link to this leaderboard in the chat, and I definitely recommend you guys join the leaderboard and you know, just take part in the community. All right, and so, you know, for those of you that are pursuing the Golden Kubestronaut, you know, I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions about it, and I'm sure even a lot of you guys are wondering, is it really even realistic to get all of these certifications, to get 14, 15 certifications? So I figured we could use this time to get some insights into how Nourhan was managed to get her Golden Kubestronaut. And, you know, I'm sure she's learned a lot through her journey and probably has a lot of great tips and tricks that you guys can use while you yourself decide to pursue the Golden Kubestronaut. So I think she can provide us a lot of valuable insights into what are some of the best things that she has kind of implemented in her study habits and the things that she's done to help prepare for these certifications and ultimately great accomplishment of the Golden Kubestronaut. So once again, Nourhan, you know, congrats on the Golden Kubestronaut. What a awesome achievement. And you know, I think one of the things that everyone probably wants to know is, how long did this take you? Did it take you 7 years? When did you first start studying for it? I mean, obviously the Golden Kubestronaut was only recently created, but When did you first start, kind of pursuing the Golden Kubestronaut, and how long did it take you?
So I got my very first certificate was CKA last
Okay.
year. And then I started actually on the journey of being a Golden Kubestronaut and a Kubestronaut this May. So I started in May, I finished in mid-October.
So from your first certification to your Golden Kubestronaut, 1 year basically. Keep in mind, guys,
Yeah.
that may not be a realistic thing for most of you guys. Nourhan is a genius. Don't let her fool you. Okay, so she absolutely blitzed through a lot of these certifications. So she's incredibly talented. For yourself and for other people, looking to take looking to get their Golden Kubestronaut, how many hours were you able to kind of put aside to studying, and how many hours do you think most people should try to kind of shoot for?
First of all, thank you, Sanjeev. I'm not genius, but like it takes just time management on everyone. Like everyone has their own schedules. For me, I always delayed and procrastinated if I don't have an exam booked. So I usually booked the exam first and then managed my schedule around it. So I'd
Get
book
the
an exam.
pressure on.
Yeah, exactly. If I don't have the exam booked, I would be lazy and like slouch around.
Yeah.
I would advise you guys to book exams that are like performance based, like Istio, a little bit later if you're not very familiar with the topic, just to get some hands on. Usually, MCQ exams are easier because they focus more on the like theoretical part of it. You have to have some hands on. You have to know the intricacies of everything as well, but give yourself some time to practice and get your hands moving with the topic if you're booking something that like LFCS or Istio, because it pays off. So that's with time management. Really, I pressured myself.
I have a question, Nourhan. Which is the hardest certification that you did?
Actually, the ICA V1 was the hardest because it wasn't complicated, and I studied from your course, Anthony. It's really really good and well structured, but there were too much questions in 2 hours. Like it was a sprint. I felt like I'm panting after I finished. So yeah.
I think they heard the complaints, and that's why they upgraded to V2, make it a lot easier. So for those that haven't done your ICA yet, congrats, you avoided a really difficult certification, and now you can do the V2 a lot easier.
Yeah,
that's why procrastination is good sometimes,
exactly.
So with that being said, what would you say was the easiest of these certifications? I'm guessing it's going to be probably one of the multiple choice ones.
Yeah, KCNA, because
KCNA,
like,
okay.
I finished CKA, CKAD, and CKS first. So by then I had a very good foundation in Kubernetes. So answering the theoretical questions beyond it was really good, which touches upon like when you were saying that Cilium is MCQ based, but we have hands-on labs. So when you do a lot of hands-on, theory becomes easier with time.
Yep. And so you also, when you're talking about the ICA, you were talking about, the issue of time. And this is something that a lot of students worry about is like, is time going to be a problem? So, you talked about how the ICA time was a little bit of a crunch. Were there any other certifications where you felt like time was an issue? And do you have any tips or tricks that could be helpful for students that find that they're always kind of running out of time when they take these exams?
For me, pretty much the two exams that I have had problems with time was IC and CKS. But like you said, you have 2 retakes, so at least the first time you get an idea about what content is in the exam, and you have plenty of time to actually practice that yourself. One of the tips that I usually did with CKS and with ICA was when I was studying, I used to type YAML files myself because that just gives you like some muscle memory on what is into a YAML file, what parameters to change, what to see, what to check. And in the first version, like Anthony said in ICA, we didn't have like links that provided any useful things. So I familiarized myself with the structure of the like resources provided, the documentation for Istio, so that I could get to the page in which I will copy a YAML file very easily and very quickly. So that would save time as well.
Yeah, I think understanding where to find things in the documentation is probably one of the most important things to saving time. So a lot of times when you guys are studying, if you want to like quickly like just check something, like, oh, how do I configure this real quick? And it's not really that important to studying. A lot of times we might just reach to like Chat GPT, but when you do that, you don't really know where it is in the documentation. And on the exam, you don't have access to these other tools or other websites. So I try to recommend that you guys always use the documentation, not because it's any more efficient or useful than using any of the other websites or tools. It's just that it'll make you more familiar with where everything is located so that on the exam, you can immediately know, I know exactly where this piece of information is, and you can save a lot of time. So, when I took like the CKA, I mean, usually I'm pretty quick on finishing exams, but those exams, I was kind of going up to the wire. So every second you can save is so important for those exams. And somebody also gave me a tip where, for an exam like CKA, where that you're going to know how to create, you're going to know how to create a pod, a deployment, a service, a lot of the common things, you're going to eventually need to create at some point in the exam. It's good at the start to just open up the pages for those documentations so you have those tabs open and you can just go right to it to save you some time. And I think that tactic can probably work in a couple of the other certifications. It looks like the ICA gives you links, so that's really, really helpful. So you may find that tactic may not be as helpful for that exam, but definitely something to consider.
Oh, one that I would advise everyone who's thinking of doing the ICAs, especially the hands-on, so CKD, the Kubernetes and ICA, having a big monitor. PSI exam doesn't let you connect monitors, or once it detects it, it asks you to disconnect it. Now, I initially did my first V1 of ICA with a 13-inch MacBook. And I suffered a lot because the banners on the side and the question, and then you got to split. They give you like a Fedora remote desktop, if you will, and then you got to split the terminal and the documentation. Needless to say, it was very difficult. I made it more difficult on myself. So if you have, I guess, an iMac or a PC with a big screen, it would make a lot of those hands-on exams much easier than if you did it on a laptop. So yeah, just a quick tip there.
And I think, and I'm not 100% positive on this, but I think if you connect a monitor to your laptop, you could just shut the lid of the laptop and then use the monitor.
I couldn't. I
couldn't? Okay.
Yeah, it said detected another monitor. And with your PSI, anyone who's taking one, you got to show your room, you got to show everything. And one of the first things they ask you is like, is that monitor going to stay there? Make sure you don't connect it and show me the back. So I wasn't able to do it. Maybe you were able to do it on a PC, but I wasn't able to do it.
I could shut the lid, but you have to have an external webcam because they're not going to allow you to open the lid of the laptop.
Right, yeah. Yep. And
for Cilium, actually, I have not just for Cilium, but for MCQ-based exams, I have one tip that saved me a lot. Before the exam, just focus on the parameters and the numbers that you think. Sometimes we can be working with something every day and not remember port numbers, for example, or configurations or stuff like that. And sometimes you get quizzed on that on MCQs. So just make a cheat sheet while you're studying of all the numbers or strange configurations and just look at it before the exam. It would help you. Something else that I used to cheat with in the exams as well. Sometimes you get a question on, let's say, what's the port number for something, or what is the syntax for something. And another question is actually, this is in the header of the question, not the choices. So you can check other questions to refresh your memory on something. This is not going to help you with all the questions, of course, just a question or two in the exam. But sometimes it helps when you need some grades.
We have a question here. It says, how to prepare for the CKS. Now, my personal experience is you should do CKA, CKAD, and then the CKS. I don't know how Sanjeev and Nourhan feel, but if you haven't done the CKA and CKD, I wouldn't do the CKS because it's the hardest of the three. But Nourhan, maybe you can add more.
Agreed. Yeah, totally agreed. You have to be very, very comfortable with Kubernetes at that point, because you're not just going to be quizzed on Kubernetes, you're going to be quizzed on multiple add-on security tools as well. So just you have to be very, very fluent in Kubernetes and make sure that you are fluent with the syntax of all the other uh, uh, external tools that you might use, like bomb tool, like stuff like that. You have to know how to use them, and a lot of hands-on, would go a long way. Sanjeev's tip about taking the first trial of your exam, seeing how you did with it and your pain points, and then practicing these for a week or two, and then retaking the exam would help as well.
Yep. And yeah, any other questions, you guys can just shoot it into the chat, and we'll try to just spend the last 10 minutes or so just kind of knocking out those questions. I see somebody asked about when the remaining courses are going to be released for the Golden Kubestronaut. So, we're shooting for having all of them released by Thanksgiving or Black Friday. So we should have that, I guess, at least by the end of next month. And Nourhan can confirm on those dates or give you a little bit more details. But yeah, we're actively working on them, and they're all on pace to be ready for that timeline.
Yeah, definitely. We're aiming by mid-November even. But yeah, Black Friday, they all should be released, and they are all mostly in the finishing touches before release. So
yep. And Yogesh is asking, a newly launched CNPA course is completely launched, or still content is being added? Is it complete, or are we still adding more content?
It's complete.
It's complete. Yeah. All right, great. Yeah.
Somebody else asked about CNPE. We're still waiting on more information on that from Linux Foundation and CNCF, but what we know, it's going to be a challenge-based exam. So we're working on some material meanwhile until they release some more information, but we'll release something when they have more information on it.
Yep. Mohammed is asking, disable kubeproxy at all nodes and let Cilium do operation rather than kubeproxy. Can it be can be do it at kind Kubernetes? Not exactly sure you're asking. Yeah, you can use Cilium to replace kubeproxy. You can choose to do it or not do it. And if you're asking about a kind cluster, like your local development cluster, you can configure kind to not deploy kubeproxy at all, so that you could have Cilium take over.
Adesina asked here if, just to confirm, the closing your laptop and using your monitor. I believe PSI exam, you download the browser and then you go through a checklist, Adesina. So what you could do is download the software, assuming you have an external keyboard and a mouse and, like Nourhan said, a camera, you can test out the pre-check and see if it's giving you an error and telling you disconnect the monitor. It usually comes up and tells you close all these apps, so you have to like terminate them, and then you're able to use it. So I would download the PSI tool and confirm that before you do your exam. That way for sure.
One more tip as well: if you have a webcam that is shooting in 4K or something like that, if it's heavy on network, you need to make sure that your network is really, really solid, because if it's consuming a lot of bandwidth, you're going to get disconnections. And if you got disconnections, like the exam is going to, the application is just going to crash, and you have to go through all the check-in again, and it's taking from your exam time. So just make sure if you're having a webcam that it does not consume that much network bandwidth.
Yeah. And even if you have good internet, no matter what, just because I get a little, nervous about these because I had an issue with it once. I always just plug in Ethernet. I never use Wi-Fi, even though I can. I just don't believe in taking certain chances, especially with these exams. It's just such a pain. Getting disconnected, then having to find your proctor again and do all of that.
I see a question from Naganada. Sorry if I mispronounced that. About it says if you crack the CKA, how much do you need for CKD? So I have the perfect experience with that. I did the CKA, and then I read somewhere, I trusted some source, and someone said, if you did the CKA, the CKD is easy. That's not true. I found the CKAD a lot harder. It's more at the container, I guess, a pod or application level. And I trusted this other comment saying that I would be a breeze. It wasn't. I should have studied a lot more. I was able to pass it, but I would say that the CKA is a good, I guess, understanding, or a good. It's obviously important to do it that one first, but I would focus more on the application level. What do you think, Nourhan?
Yeah, I guess the same, but I'm not sure which CKA version you took. The most recent one that was in last Feb, or the one before?
The one before.
The one before was really easy. The new one is really hard. So compared to the new one, yeah, the CKAD has a lot in common with CKA, but you have to focus on the application deployment part of it, like rollouts, canary, blue, green, stuff like that, as well as jobs, cron jobs. So if you're familiar with that topics, it's going to be easy for you. It's not terribly hard, but yeah, compared to the CKA, it's harder.
I shouldn't mention that when I did the CKAD, I did it 2 days after the CKA, because someone had said, oh, like, you should be able to just pass it. So I booked it right away thinking, hey, it's still fresh in my head, I'm going to do the CKAD. And then I was sort of surprised to see how much of it I didn't know.
Yeah, definitely. Someone is asking as well, the CKA and CKAD overlaps. So like I said, CKAD is focusing on application development. So it focuses on rollouts, how to like do a canary rollout and a blue-green deployment, stuff that stateful sets, stuff that is relevant to the application development, whereas CKA is just focused on cluster administration. So that's the difference. There is like 50% common between both in terms of the basics of Kubernetes. But that you have to know the differences and be comfortable with the differences to be able to take CKD after CKA.
Someone asked what's the minimum internet connection required for these exams. I would say that most internet connections should be able to do it, but what Nourhan said, if you're using a camera and you're using a 4K camera or something like that, then you might have issues. But it's not really the internet connection. What I found with it was PSI sometimes would I'd have issues, but it was probably more with them than it was with my internet connection, because I have a 1 gig download and upload, and I still had some issues, but it was more on their platform than the internet connection.
I agree, but they don't care if it's on your side or their side. They just, like, the PSI browser, once it detects a network jitter, it just closes. It does not even ask you. So. Like Anthony said as well, there is a test tutorial, like launch, or like a test exam that you can launch once you subscribe to the exam. So you can actually go through whether to know whether you need another monitor, or like you can close the monitor and do that or not. You go through like the requirements, like internet, installed software, administrative privileges, stuff like that. So you can test it before your actual exam comes.
All right. So it looks like we're kind of wrapping things up. Do you guys have any last minute questions before we end this session? Looks like.
I see one about a StratoShark. I personally never used it. I don't know if Sanjeev, you used it before.
I've never even heard of it.
I think it's just like Wireshark, right? It's to capture and inspect like network drops and network packets. I definitely never used it. I got to be honest, and Sanjeev doesn't look like he's had either. But we'll keep an eye on it.
And for Zaid, I don't think we have any courses on Wireshark or StratoShark. But if you want a course on Wireshark, I would personally love to do it, but you're going to have to bother my manager, vote up that. I believe that we have a page on our website where you can vote for topics. So definitely recommend messaging the team on that, seeing if we can get the ball rolling on that. All right. Anything else? Yeah, looks like yeah, I think that's about it. So yeah, guys, I appreciate you guys joining this session. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Sanjeev.
Okay.